Welcome back to the Daddyless Daughters Podcast in partnership with Solace. I go by the name of Aliyah Ali, and today we have Theresa back in the building for part 2. The reason why we felt like it was important to have this conversation is because the impact of addiction on families, and your situation is quite unique because you didn't take your first drug until 32 years old. It's been 16 years since she's clean, and when I speak to you about your experiences and stuff, it's like we're talking about it like it was still yesterday. And I do want to touch a lot more on, the impact on the family within the home, outside of the home, and also the children. We are talking about dirty water and the cycles that are passed down to them and their experience within your own experiences as well. And I know that there's so much. We only was able to scratch the surface last time. So I just want to give you this platform again so we can kind of dig a bit deeper and just get a little bit more controversial as well, because you represent mothers that have walked this path in life. And I represent the daughters that need answers, the children that need answers as to why. So where would you like to start?
Normally I talk all the time. I actually don't know. I'm quite with it all. I don't know. Obviously, I didn't used to do drugs. I used to buy clothes off of someone, like receive them, fantastic clothes. I had, I was a receiver, so I had people all over London that used to buy the things that he'd nicked. I fell for him, who was a heroin and crack user.
Who's him?
This guy, who I did mention briefly last time, because obviously I used to buy off of him, so I used to have thousands of pounds. But from when I started taking drugs, obviously he shot himself in the foot, really. But it started off, I'd got a really bad headache. I had a BM convertible. There was only 200 in the whole country. I had all the fantastic clothes, some of which he'd nicked me. My kids were decked out. Anyway, I had a headache and we had no headache tablets. I'd already left the house. I was staying at my brother's. Anyway, I did a pipe. It didn't get me. They say about the minute that you smoke crack, you're hooked. It didn't get me.
What was that first feeling like?
Nothing really, a little bit. But it turns out the pipes he did were really small. He was a heroin addict. So he didn't used to do massive pipes because otherwise it would have destroyed his heroin buzz. I now know. But anyway, so it went on. I still used to take him out to work, buy his things, because obviously it hadn't affected me. And then he'd got a couple of friends. He'd brought them round one day and this girl did me a pipe. I was gone. That was it.
Can you explain that first
the
feeling?
Feeling of, I don't know, euphoria. I don't know. And why, I didn't used to take drugs. Every so often I'd go and have a cocktail. But I wasn't that type of person. I don't know. Why on earth? I don't know the answer. Did I know the answer, Aliyah? I could maybe help everybody else and cure the drug problem, whatever. I don't know the answer.
But they do say that the root cause of addiction is trauma. Do you not acknowledge the trauma?
No. Do you know what? So many girls, obviously from when I used to go to prison and meet all these people and in the crack houses and everything. And obviously I did get to know all those people, but a lot of their stories are bad stories. But why me? I didn't... there was no abuse when I was young. I know that, it wasn't quite right. I didn't have a dad. But there weren't bad things happen to me as such, and I didn't go into a children's home or get moved around or be interfered with. Or, I had a violent partner, and the things, as I said in the first podcast. But I don't actually know the answer. I believe, and I also... this is going to cause a lot of controversy. I also don't accept, like people used to say, you're ill, or I don't that isn't my stance on it.
Like it's a disease, you mean?
You
don't think it's a disease?
I personally, from my own perspective, where I was a crack addict for 13 years, I don't think that, no. I don't know whether, from when I smoked crack, nothing else mattered. I loved my kids with a vengeance. I said that in the first episode. At the end of the day, I would, when I then had Max, so I had Max, he was a crack baby because I was smoking crack when I was pregnant with him. But I also fell pregnant, and I believed, I was trying to stop smoking, and I did think, again, I don't know who's going to listen to this and think I'm disgusting or whatever. I did think that maybe if I had a baby, I would focus on the baby and I wouldn't smoke crack anymore. And don't get me wrong, I love him and he was wanted. But that is what I thought. It wasn't even so much about his dad. His dad was a heroin addict that I met in court.
Right.
From Bermondsey, but he was down in Folkestone. Anyway, so I got pregnant, was still smoking. Ended up, I'd gone into the kids had a friend that I used to ring from prison and speak to the kids in his house. I'd gone round there one day, obviously at it. Anyway, met him. He was a character, used to wear loads of belts and watches and spurs on his boots. I went in thinking. But anyway, he used to sort of look after me. And then I ended up, this was in London, I ended up going home to Folkestone, told the midwife that I'd been smoking, told everybody because I'm honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, had the baby. So Bobby was by that time in prison. So I had Max, but still wanted to smoke. I didn't smoke for 10 months. I was breastfeeding. But this is what I'm saying, the binging thing. Then I went, didn't go back. I was arrested. They took Max off me, left the pram in the cell. So this...
What do you mean they took him off you?
So I was nicked. I'd got a cab. I'd got one of the kids' friends in the cab and I'd got the baby. They took me to Ilford police station, took the baby away, left me with the pram in the cell, and that was that. Put him in care, left me with the pram. Anyway.
How old was he then?
10 months. I think about 10 months. They didn't give him to my mum or anything. They actually
put him straight into
foster care. Anyway, even though we were known to them because obviously I told them what I was. Plus, my kids were on the at-risk register. I needed to say this about social services because my son was going out with someone at the time who had difficulties at home. They even gave me this girl to look after who was from social services.
How old was she?
15. Very, very troubled. Why? Obviously, I was troubled. I was a drug addict. My kids were troubled. They were at risk. I had a baby who was on the at-risk register, who was the care of Kent County Council or Kent Social Services or whatever. They told me that he was theirs till he was 18. Anyway, what I'm saying is, and so I had to have all the meetings with social services. It was such a big, big thing. Like this, social services is like this big fear. So now I've got this baby and I'm trying to do the right thing, but I've also got an addiction. Anyway, so they took him away. And then obviously with that was it then, wasn't it? Because I didn't have to worry. I wasn't, I didn't used to go home. When I used to leave home to take drugs, because it's like I didn't want it round my children, even though my children obviously felt the effects of it and they'd be left on their own, which, as I say, I did mention in that story. So anyway, so now I'm thieving, taking crack, but not, even though it was bad, it wasn't that bad. Anyway, so the baby's gone, as I say. So the more problems...
What support was you offered?
None, because I didn't want any support. All I wanted to do was take crack. Like, I wasn't in that. Initially, they tried to offer me support, but it was the wrong type of support. The health visitor came round and said, I've brought some needles round. And I looked at her and I said, why have you brought needles round? So she went, what for you? I went, I suggest that you go away and do a little bit of research and come back. I was a smoker. I was a crack smoker. You know, I didn't use needles. You know, I was aghast at it all. Nobody could help me because nobody seemed to know what was what. You know, I did used to go to the doctors in the hospital, and this thing about what came first, the chicken or the egg, I'd go to the psychiatrist who didn't take me seriously because I wasn't in there with odd slippers on, and nobody did take me seriously. I don't know whether they thought I'd gone in and was making up a story to get attention. I don't know. You know, and obviously Maxie Boy's dad initially, because he was a drug addict, we'd gone to the same place, but obviously they couldn't see us. We had to be separate. So, and I'm sort of telling you all backwards because it all sort of gets very muddled up.
Of course.
But so Max is gone. There came a point, I must have got in touch with somebody. Christmas had come and gone, I think, and I'd maybe felt guilty. Got in touch with somebody, had an appointment to go and see the kids over at Lewisham with a friend. And obviously then I'd gone shoplifting, but not with a view to just getting crack, with a view for the kids. So I'd gone, we did have this little chat on Sunday. I'd gone into House of Fraser with a big coat on, my shoplifting coat, and I'd literally got every piece of Moschino mosh that there was, or the off-key, because that's what my kids love. They love jungle, and, you know, that's what they were. And then it came to thousands. I came out I literally was that wide, you know, but because again, the extras going into it, you know, how they let me leave the shop, I will never actually know. I just don't know. And then went and obviously gave them all that, but it wasn't even about the goods, was it, or the trainers, because at the end of the day, they wanted their mum. That's all they wanted.
Yeah.
But as I say, and then we went through the process of trying to get Max back. I was going to the contact centre twice a week.
How old was he at this stage?
He was a baby. He used to scream every time that I left. The boys weren't seeing him initially. I think my mum used to see him on a different day because obviously they didn't give him to my mum. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I wasn't using drugs. I used to go to a day project every day. Wasn't using. Got him back, and the minute I got him back, and it had always obviously gone to court and social services, the meetings, you know, the whole big thing, because obviously he was with foster carers. Got him back, and then smoked crack. Obviously I knew enough, I loved him enough to ring someone, and I am getting a little bit muddled up, but ring someone.
Do you know how old he was at that time?
He was 10 months, I think, when he was taken. And then I probably didn't get him back. I think he was getting on for 2. It was months. Anyway, and they'd come and see my house because I was obviously back at Dennis's house, but not with, Dennis wasn't there. And I remember, so I'd got him back. We must have had a second birthday party, which was fabulous. You know, everything was all lovely because my house was lovely, I was lovely, the baby was lovely, the cake was lovely, the cake stand, it was my brother's girlfriend's cake stand, everything was lovely. And I say that, there is a reason why I'm saying that, you know, because I've got a yellow kettle and toaster, and all those things were so important to me, like this facade.
I was just about to say that. I'm hearing like 2 things from you. And one of them is like the facade,
He had a lovely outfit on, like a whatever French outfit.
Why did you used to do that? Why did you paint your life that way?
I still do to this day, because do you know what? I can't let people see what's on the inside. So I paint this picture even today, of what I think I should be. This, you know, not perfect or for vanity or any of that. Just, I can't let people see what, you know, because I think when you fall over, you get back up, right? And when you fall over, you get back up. You just have to. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I do think that if I was to fall, could I ever get back up? You know, so I paint, I do this thing, you know, that everything's lovely and everyone came and my brother, and it was just a lovely party. You know, I've got all the pictures. Max, for years and years, had a picture of me holding him at his party, and it was lovely. You know, I had a ghost dress on and jewellery from Liberty's. It was all lovely. Anyway, so that's how old he was. And then I went again.
Did you do it that same night?
No, not that same night. But when things used to be good is when I would go. I think I'd reward myself. These are the nitty gritty things we need to get on the table, Aliyah. When things are good, right? Not when they're bad. For me, I can't say for other people. When they're good, it's like you'd reward yourself and just think, I'll just go and I'll just spend a tenner. Anyway. But, so a couple of times, the kids have come downstairs to go to work. Obviously, the baby was there. And in the bed is like Kit Kat wrappers and cut off pens and straws, and where I'd make a pipe, have a pipe, and then I'd bomb because I couldn't let them see me like that. My oldest son used to know. My oldest son, a few hours before, would say to me, what is the matter with you? You're all didgy. What is the matter? Because he knew, but even though I hadn't got any crack, or I knew from if they were going out or whatever, they used to go to jungle fever, and then I would plan it. Even though it was subconscious, I would think, how much money have I got? Like this whole thing anyway. But, and as I say, a couple of times they'd come down. They couldn't go to work because they've got a 2-year-old baby to look after. But anyway, then the baby...
How old was your oldest at this time?
Max is 25 this year. Matthew's 42 in February. So how old was Matthew?
Well, he would have been around coming up to 20, no?
If it was 23 years ago, he was 18.
Okay, yeah.
Mark was 17. They were babies.
Yeah.
You know, they were babies themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, as I say, Max was 15 years younger than Mark. But anyway, so this particular time, they must have been at work. Obviously, I'm on one. I'd rung somebody to come and look after Max. And then I sent it round to my friends, who's rung my mum, rung Joanne, my brother's girlfriend, who's rung my mum. So now they've taken him. I was cracked up for a few days or whatever, then decided to be normal. Went to get the baby from my mum's, to have the door shut on me, to be told that he's Kent Social Services. And I'm not allowed to go into my mum's. And with that, I went. Obviously, I had a house with I did go home a couple of times because I still had the key. Get some clothes, but obviously it just broke my heart because there was a kitchen in the kitchen, you know, all the baby's things, because he'd gone. But then that was it. That gave me license to just do what I wanted. Then the real, like this other life began, because I feel like I've had 2 lives. I feel like I've had a lot of lives in my life, but it's like I'm talking about somebody else. Like with the crack thing, it's like it's talking about somebody else. But it wasn't, it's me. What you see now that was me. And then when I used to take crack, obviously I'd had a couple of boyfriends like Bobby, who was inside, this other guy who, you know, used to dance with Max. He used to play a Bob Dylan song, Baby Stop Crying. But I mean, he wasn't Max's dad, but he'd taken over that role. But from when Max got taken, that was it. I was gone. Anyway, I hooked up with this guy. As I said, I'd never had a boyfriend in the crack world. Anyway, and obviously, he used to take me to work, you know. I was his girl, anyway.
Take you
And
to work, what does that mean?
I used to shoplift.
Okay.
He himself used to do dodgy things, but
Yeah.
the minute he met me, he decided he didn't need to go to work anymore.
Okay.
Anyway, I have that effect on men where they, for some reason, the minute they meet me, I don't know. Anyway, so, you know, I used to go shoplifting, as I say. A couple of times I was caught, gave the dodgy names. I've actually got 27 aliases. You know, I'm doing a CRB at the moment because I'm trying to work with the domestic violence organisation. And the CRB is already, they can't understand it because they can't have people with pasts, can they? Even now, to this day, if you've got a dodgy past, it's very hard for them to unravel it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very hard for me to unravel it.
Yeah, and they expect you to explain it. So it's
And you know, like... I didn't want to put the aliases on the form, but you have to be honest. And the minute you put the aliases on, they don't want to help you anymore. Anyway, met this guy. I used to go to work. We'd go to crack houses. You know, we both smoked crack. Anyway, he was up on another charge, and plus I then fell pregnant. That's a really big thing that no one knows about. Anyway, obviously I didn't go to the hospital or anything, but he obviously used to take matters into his own hands, even though he wasn't the most violent person I've been with, and try and kick the baby out of me, obviously, when the crack had finished or whatever, I don't know, for whatever reason. He used to call me Whatless. Anyway, and so at some point I had gone to the hospital and said, obviously, I need a termination. The baby obviously couldn't have been right. That was my... And also, the other thing, I just lost a baby. Why would I then, like this disposable society, I'll just get another baby? I couldn't have a baby. Anyway, so he ended up going to court and going to prison. And
for what?
For something else, nothing to do with me from the past. Anyway, there were instances, as I said in my last podcast, you know, I'd be in the police station with black eyes and all that, and lie to them to get out, because all I ever wanted was to get bail, to get crack. That was my existence.
Out of all your partners, how many of them were abusive? How many of them hit you?
Maxie Boy's dad never hit me. And the kid's friend's dad never hit me. But everybody else has hit me. Anyway, not that I've had that many partners. Don't get me wrong. I've had encounters or whatever, but as far as partners go, you know, as I say, for whatever reasons, you know, like with the first guy, like with the crack, thinking you deserve it, you know, because I was a crack addict, so all I used to want to do was smoke crack, you know. That's what I wouldn't have been with him. It was, you know, the whole thing, you know, I wouldn't have found him if I wasn't a crack addict, would I? But anyway, so he'd gone to prison. I had his car, but I also had an appointment at the hospital, which I had, even though I was a crack addict and nothing else mattered, and I had no responsibilities, I didn't have a house or bills to pay because I'd gone. I went to the hospital and actually went and got a nightie and slippers or whatever. I'd had a friend that wasn't a drug addict that had gone with me. Anyway, I went into Homerton Hospital. They obviously knew I was a drug addict. I don't, you know, I never actually mentioned it, but anyway. So I don't know how far gone I was or any of those things. But I spent 3 days in a room on my own. I don't even know, giving birth to a dead baby. I obviously was further along, and I don't even actually want to dwell on it because it is what it is. Anyway.
But it's important though, isn't it?
I know, but how do you, obviously, so I was on my own. Then they told me that I could go. I actually, I don't even want to say the words, but obviously other people go through this. It wasn't an abortion where you go in or a termination, you just come straight. I was there 3 days. I don't know what on earth. I don't know whether I was weak. I don't know what it was, as to why I was there that long, in the middle of the room with no one else there. No one was saying to me. I don't know. I will never know the answer to that. But then they'd come and said I could go. I was just sort of left with this baby. I don't know, because I've never actually, I don't think about those type of things because there's nothing I can do about them. No matter how awful or guilty I feel, I can't change anything. So
do you blame yourself for stuff like that?
Well, of course, I feel, So, but then, obviously, this then set off another really big series of events, because I then came out, went back to work, the car broke down in Oxton. You've got to remember, even though I took drugs for years, I actually remember every fine detail of everything. Anyway, this lovely guy came along. I said, do you need any help? Obviously, even though I never knew that I looked like I was, but obviously people spot you. Predators spot vulnerability. Anyway, turned out he was actually a crack addict himself. He actually knew my boyfriend. Anyway, small world, the Hackney.
So you stayed with this guy after that experience?
My boyfriend was in prison. So then this other guy had come and said, what's the matter with the car? So then I'm with him now, really vulnerable, just given birth to a dead baby, whatever. Anyway, so he was a diabetic and had to have insulin or whatever. I don't know too much about it. He used to have to inject himself all the time. He'd got his mum's flat. He lived there with his brother. The mum was away. Anyway, so obviously I go to work. That's just what I've always done with the crack. Go to work at Marks and Spencer's, try and get ready so I don't look what I am. Anyway, he was the nicest boy. The only thing I can thank him for is introducing me to music. And I'm going to say this because it was a really important part of my life, as nutty as that sounds. This hip-hop thing, I was a soul head, like R&B and all, soul girl, lacy ladies. So from when he'd listen to things and they'd then suddenly interrupt, that be a lovely maze track, and I'd think, what is this shit? But I ended up, the relevance of it. This is what I've got to say. The relevance of Joe Crack and all you bitches be fucking for money, playing niggers, but they can't get shit from me. With the phones and people never knew that was real life. That wasn't just in America. That was real life. All those things that they were chatting about had come to England, that were on the streets now, that, which I think people still to this day don't believe that there's this other side of life. Anyway, so the music, I started loving the music, but so I'd go to work, the minute he did a pipe, he would turn. So I wasn't allowed to walk in front of him, behind him, or next to him. Okay?
So where are you supposed to walk? Your options are limited.
No, you weren't allowed to. I had wires and cotton wrapped round him, and that was to take all his work. His work that actually was my work, because I was the one that had gone to work to get the money to buy the crack. I didn't even smoke crack because I was so petrified of this guy and his prangness that I couldn't even do a pipe. And to sum it up, so the first time it happened, obviously he's beat the absolute living daylights out of me. And I remember being in a corner because his brother had come into the room, being in the corner because I didn't want anyone to see me because I was in such a state. I was actually horrendously black and blue. Anyway, why did I stay there?
Did any of your children ever see you like that?
No. My children don't even know about it. So he then got a car that I'd paid to get out of the menders. We used to go to work. I used to go to work and do things that would get me nicked so that I could get away from him. But he'd be waiting outside for me, and for some reason they just let me out. He used to tell me that I must sit down with the car, and wait. And I used to sit for 3 hours with my hands on the steering wheel. And then, even if I'd been really good and really still, he'd come back, he'd go to the boot, get the car wrench out of the boot and beat the shit out of me with the car wrench. Also, we'd go into places and he'd then strip me, give me an internal looking for the crack. And also, I didn't have to go to his house. He'd strip me, sell all my clothes, sell my bags, sell my shoes for crack, have me with my arms in the air, burn me with lighters. Obviously, he wasn't well. And then once the police had...
When you say obviously he wasn't well, you're not making an excuse for him, are you?
Some people, when they smoke, and I believe that where he wasn't well, I don't know. I've never looked it up with the insulin and the blood sugar levels. I don't know. He that's all I can think about it, because, do you know, Ali, I can't... If I start having bitterness inside me, this is why, ultimately, all of these things are the result of my drug use. I put myself in those situations. And at the time, I thought I did deserve it. I don't know. You're saying about the kids seeing me. Once, I did take his car and go home to the kids. I think that I'd got a load of things. I'm not actually sure. But I was still terrified that he was going to find me with the car, even though it was in a different area of London. And I think that I'd got changed indoors. But the kids, or maybe the kids weren't there, I don't know. Maybe they weren't there. Anyway, I remember one of the times I was with him, I got nicked by Chelsea police. I was shoplifting in Marks and Spencer's, probably again about £3,000. They felt so sorry for me. I weighed 6 stone. The kids couldn't have ever seen me like that, I don't think. Anyway, I weighed 6 stone. I was covered in scabs and burns. I was obviously in a proper state. And they felt so sorry for me. They didn't even actually charge me. They sent me to St Mary's at Paddington and booked me a bread and breakfast in Earls Court. And when I was over there, I rang him. And he said, I'll come and get you. I'll make you lovely tea and toast. Anyway, I don't know what... As I'm telling you, part of me is asking myself, what on earth? But anyway, it is what it is. I did end up getting away from him.
Do you think there's a link between your impulsiveness, shoplifting, addiction, and the men?
I think, as I said, that if you put yourself in those situations, definitely the crack addiction and the euphoria and the adrenaline rush and all, and then the shoplifting. I don't know, saying that, the shoplifting in the end was work. It was just a means to an end, that I would just get as much as I could to get as much crack as I could. And for years, there was no men. But I think from when I left home, never to return, and lost Max, lost the baby, I don't know. I think that I'd gone into a different level. And also, my mum died. My mum died when I was in prison. Because I used to go in and out of prison.
What happened to the kids' dads?
The kids' dad used to try his best with them. He was always there for them, even though he was an alcoholic. There was always a stew on the go or spaghetti bolognese. As I say, my kids have actually seen the first podcast, and I'm not going to say loved it. They think I'm amazing. And I might have painted their dad in a very bad light. Their dad was a really good dad. He was young and he was an alcoholic. He's still an alcoholic. And I believe that when you're in the throes of addiction, I now understand better than I did initially, that you do things, but he was always there for them. They always had a roof over their heads. And I'm not saying that there was a lot more, that there was any support or understanding, but yeah.
What about Max's dad?
Max's dad. Years ago, I'd gone to the hospital when I first started smoking crack and said, right, there's something wrong with me. I need help. And I'd gone and seen a psychiatric assessment or whatever. And they'd said to me, when you listen to the radio, do you think they're talking about you? And when you watch the television, do you think that they're talking about you? Do you think it's about you? And I thought, what on earth? Anyway, and I went, no. Anyway, I went for a night in St Clement's where everyone was in like little sort of cubicles, one woman, and I'm not judging or taking the piss at all, but that was their life. One woman had all paint around her bed, that was obviously her thing. She felt safe with the paint, I knew that I shouldn't be there.
What is?
It was a mental hospital.
Okay.
But then when I rang my friend to come and get me, apparently I couldn't get out either. I'm laughing. But anyway, so Bobby's, Max's dad, I was smoking crack. And because I had gone to rehab in 2000, I'm muddling things up desperately, but there's nothing much I can do about it. I had gone to rehab in 2000. I'd gone to court and all the aliases came back on me. I was looking at a long time in prison, like habitual prolific offender. I think I was up for 11 different offences, loads of different aliases. Anyway, they gave me they gave me rehab and 2 years probation or suspended sentence or so. Anyway, so I'd gone to rehab. I'd spoken to Bobby on the phone. He was obviously out because he'd done a long prison sentence when Max was little. Anyway, but then I'd got out of rehab, started using drugs again. Anyway, so I was smoking crack at the time in someone's house in a gaff, and the radio was on, and I don't even know if I should say his name. Anyway, and they'd said Robert Honeyman was stabbed to death and dumped in the river. And I'm looking at the radio. I think it was Choice FM, I don't know anyway. And I went out to the phone box, because obviously I didn't have a mobile, this is early days. And I rang my son, Matthew, and I said, Bobby's been stabbed to death and dumped in the river. And he went, do I swear? I don't even know.
You can be yourself.
So he'd said, fuck off, and put the phone down on me. And I rang him back and I went, I've just heard on the radio, Robert Honeyman's been stabbed to death and dumped in the river Weir. Anyway, and he went, Mum, fuck off. He went, you're going to end up dead in the fucking canal in Hackney. And he put the phone down on me. Because obviously, by that time, I didn't see anybody. I wasn't at home. Obviously, I think at one point Matthew had come and seen me. I'd rung him, and I was as thin as a rake. They couldn't. Obviously, the tough love had to step in, because I don't know how you coped, but I tried to do the right thing by not going near my kids, not bringing crack to my kids' houses initially. Do you understand? Like, to my home. But they loved me, but in the end, they would have been destroyed. There had to come a time when, even though they loved me, they had to let me go. I know this. Anyway, so that's how I found out that Bobby had died. It turned out that, again, over drugs, someone had blamed him.
What impact did this all have on Max?
Max was being looked after by my mum. The older boys used to go down, take it in turns every week. Like, one would go down one weekend. And even that, I'm so proud of them, because you know what? They were ravers. You know, they'd go to the Cool, what was it called? Cool FM? Anyway, they were really big on all, you know, their friend's uncle, you know, owned it. And
they were still quite young themselves,
they
still made time.
They were young, they were going to raves.
Yeah.
But every weekend, one of them would go down to be with my mum, because my mum was my age.
And what happened to Max when your mum passed away? He had to go back into care?
Yeah. Obviously, my mum had him. My mum doted on him. I have to hold this in my heart, that it was what was meant to be, that my mum was lonely, and, you know, my mum was alone. And then my mum had Max from when he was 2. And she doted, you know, she spoilt him. It gave her this new lease of life, you know, that obviously I didn't know because I wasn't there. I think I did go around there once, even though I wasn't allowed to. Anyway. And then my mum died. She was 67. And then the boys were still young, weren't they? But they both fought for him.
So they wanted to take full custody of him?
Yeah. He was put into care, and it was not nice care. Like, he'd got every Thomas, you know, the Brio. I mean, I know you haven't got children, Aliyah, but all the Thomas the Tank and Gordon Edward, you know, he'd got everything, you know, they'd stolen all that. They obviously were people that just did it for the money, you know. Anyway, I think it took a good few months. It may have even been a year, I don't know. Because by that time, I think I'd gone once to a social service meeting and gone, and that I just, from when my mum died, that was I was getting worse and worse and worse. The baby had gone, and this is years have gone by this time. Anyway, so by that time Matthew was with a partner and Mark was with his partner. They both got children of their own. Anyway, Matthew ended up getting Max with Lisa, and they've brought Max up as theirs, with care of social services. So he's always been a looked after kid, even though he's been really lucky. He's never had to go, you know, and I've always said this to him, you know, since, you know, he's been so lucky. He's never had to go into care or, you know, any of those things, because he was with family.
But how's that affected your relationship with him?
Obviously, I didn't really have a relationship with him.
Later on, once you've come clean, it's been 16 years since you was clean.
Yeah.
What's those 16 years look like?
He was about 9. Obviously, by that time, he was in Matthew and Lisa's family unit. Lisa had 2 children by that time. So even though I was in recovery, I wasn't in the standard recovery where I'd got any help. It was my last time in prison, and I'd asked for help, and someone had come to see me from Hackney Social Services, because that was my area of drug use. And when I got out, I went and stayed with Mark in Catford. Mark had picked me up with Marcus, my grandson, who was 5. Obviously, Hannah had said, no, you're not taking him to see that, you know, crackhead, you know, whatever. Anyway, which I totally understand all those things. Anyway, but I was staying with Mark. He'd had the day off work. We'd gone over to social services. And she offered me a day programme in Hackney. We were staying in Catford. I was in Catford. Why would you put somebody back into their area of drug use? Plus, I'd only ever been in rehab once. I was the most prolific offender. I've never actually even met anybody that's been in prison 38 times. I haven't. Not men, not women. you know, as I say, and not because I was a bad shoplifter, I was a good shoplifter, but the amount I shoplifted, obviously it's law of averages that you've got to, you know, you've got to get caught. But anyway, so that was the only help they offered me. So Mark said, you know, we'll do it on our own, which we did. I went back once.
How did Max react to that? Did he engage when it was time for reconciliation and for you to work on your relationship?
They didn't.
Did he engage or did he punish you?
He was young. No, he was young. And he'd been told I wasn't well. My mum had told him for years that I wasn't well.
So he didn't know the truth?
No, he didn't know the truth. And to begin with, Matthew and Lisa didn't let me see him initially, which again, I understand. I'd seen the other children, but not him. You know, it had to be done and it had to be structured, didn't it?
Yeah.
And the social services thing and all, you know, like, you know, the social services thing is a whole other story.
Yeah, I know.
Which you know that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and how you have to jump through. And when you're in recovery, according to other people, the hoops you've got to jump through and all the things that you've got to achieve and the barriers, you know, and that's not even the right word, the barriers, like the hurdles. Sometimes, and if they decide that you're not having, and again, I'm not, obviously I was in the wrong, you know, I'm not saying, but I don't know, because I'm not even putting it across properly. You know, since then, obviously I've worked, which we're not going to discuss my work, but I've worked with girls, you know, and that they get a letter from social services, which I myself have had, and all that it entails, and like having to go to the kids' school when they were little and have a whole big meeting with the police and the social workers and the teachers and the headmasters. And again, because I'm articulate and intelligent, you know, in the early days, Matthew's headmaster had offered me a job, like to go in helping, you know, but I didn't even want anything like that. I didn't even really want to stop taking crack. You know, I just used to pretend.
Well, we're running out of time. I want us to kind of focus on this recovery journey. Like I said, when I speak to you about your experiences, it's like we're talking about it like it was today, yesterday. And I know from my own, living with my own trauma and how hard it is after, no matter how long ago these things happened. And I know it must still haunt you. What is that? What does that look like?
Right. It will still haunt me, I think. For the first couple of years, every night I had nightmares. I couldn't sleep. It was getting clean was a very, it wasn't just a thing of getting clean, because you had all the associated behaviours, like the shoplifting. You know, at one point I thought, you know, I could shoplift and not smoke crack, but I couldn't. Because if I'd have shoplifted, then I would have had the money, then it would have associated with the crack, and then it would have been this whole thing again. So I had to learn how to live all over again. That was the first thing. After a couple of years, and obviously by that time I'm seeing the kids and I'm seeing Max, but not just, even though he knew I was his mother, I never played a mother role, really. So it's just like I was a friend of the family, wasn't I, you know. Sometimes he'd come and stay, but it wasn't, the bond wasn't there. You know, that bond is with Lisa. You know, as I say, he's got a new girlfriend, which I'm not supposed to know about yet, but it's Lisa he told first. I knew, you know, I found that out the day before. And those things don't hurt me. That I know it looks like I'm going to cry. They don't hurt me. I'm really pleased. I'm so pleased that he had somebody. Can you imagine? And I do believe Max never really knew me. So he wasn't brought up in it all. I wasn't really ever his mother. So he views things differently. He's got a very different approach. He obviously knew that Bobby was stabbed to death and dumped in the river. He's got a newspaper article where there was a reward that Matthew had given him years later.
But it's like the voids, in it, as we were discussing. Like, you lived with certain voids. You might not know what it is that he was missing or what you are missing, but you know
yes, of course.
there's parts
definitely,
of you that are gone.
Definitely. But he said to me once, I'd said to him, when he was going to university, we'd had a coffee in Sandgate, and I'd said, I wonder what would have happened if we'd have still lived in Sandgate. And he went, but then, Mum, I wouldn't be the person I am now. He is a different boy. Matthew and Mark lived with it. They were outside crack houses. I think I must have done a pipe in front of Mark. I don't know. I think I was doing a pipe in the car. Anyway, but those two boys have lived it and lived on it and on Malmesbury Estate. I don't know. You're in the flats, in the on the staircases with all the other kids. That was their family, right? They know what there is to know about these things because, again, all their friends. So they lived within that, and their friends from that area, that they're still like that with all their friends, which again I love, and that they understand each other. And like you're the daughter, they're the sons. I believe the trauma is theirs as opposed to me. What I did to them, and I would say this PTSD. But as I've spoken to Matthew about this, and Mark does say the same thing. And if you were to say to my boys about it, they have moved on. Obviously, it's part of their life experience, which makes them who they are now, and makes them, I believe, I'm not saying they haven't got their issues. No one's perfect, but the kindness and the understanding, and that lost people are attracted to them. And as they've said, they weren't fiddled with, and all in all, and the fact their dad was there, and even though they've had horrific childhoods from the ages of 11 and 12, remember before that they had this perfect childhood, me being wanted to be perfect, but that in turn has sort of got them through. And the other thing that was that they were both workers. I was so proud that they both went to work for a living and didn't choose the wrong way to go, because obviously they could have. Matthew,
I would love to speak to them, from a father's perspective, because it sounds like they've managed to, regardless, break
I wanted
the cycle.
to bring Matthew today. Do you know that?
I would have loved that. But obviously, it's all a process, isn't it?
No,
but I just
know.
feel like they have managed to break the cycle.
And from their perspective, and even, do you know, it's really funny because this guy that I used to stay with, like their best friend's dad, who again, who is right, I don't know. As Matthew says, we've all got our own idiosyncrasies and our own ways, Like, I know that the mental health is a big thing at the moment. I don't actually think that I had mental health, Aliyah, but as I say, what did come first? Was I depressed before I took crack? I don't think I was, personally.
That was another thing I wanted to ask you. Was you numb during all these experiences?
I think you have to go off into this other world. And also, as I was going to say to you, from when you put yourself in those positions, you have to expect the consequences of...
But we don't know those consequences until we meet them.
No, I know. And obviously, I didn't go into a crack house that day with loads of money thinking that I was going to be raped at the end of it. One example, that's not even a crack house. I woke up in someone's van. I don't know anything about... I know what I had on and where I'd left from. I don't know what happened in between. I woke up in someone's van in the front seat. And again, I'm good at telling stories, so it actually sounds quite funny. I have to make it sound like that because I'm not going to sit and cry because I won't be able to get the words out. So I woke up in a van, and again, I don't know. This sounds mad. It serves me right. I used to smoke crack for weeks on end. I don't know what happened because I don't know. The long and short of it was, I had no phone, no bag, no crack, no pipe, no nothing, no knickers, nothing.
And you don't know what happened, how you got there?
I would never know. I don't know whose van it was.
One question, have you forgiven yourself for this life?
Yeah, I think you have to forgive yourself. Right, let's go back to when I was in recovery. You have, after a couple of years, to begin with, I just used to go to the library. I had no friends, no nothing. I didn't want to have anything to do with anybody apart from my family, because my way of doing recovery was to just be in a bubble. I didn't want 12 steps. I didn't feel that was the way for me. As I said, I tried to get support and it wasn't on offer. So I thought I'd do it myself. As I said, I was with my son. My son was the only person left that knew that Theresa was, that his mum was in there somewhere, deep down. Anyway, and without him, I wouldn't be sitting here. So anyway, then I'm in recovery, and then a couple of years later, and as I said, I had my family. I'd started trying to do some work around addicts because I thought that was, I really wanted to work with children whose mums and dads were addicts. But that's a really a hard thing, especially when you've got the previous offences that I have and all that sort of thing. But the forgiveness thing, the guilt is it's negative. This is what I've been taught. I've been on hundreds of courses, child protection, this, that. Guilt is negative. So no matter what, I cannot go back, right? But I'm going to tell you something. I had a back operation in 2014. I'd had an accident. I know I'm disabled. When I had my back operation, obviously I was on medication. I've never had a problem with any other medication or any other drug, only crack. I told you this, never come down off anything, never drunk. I used to take OxyContin and everything because that's what I was prescribed. Pregabalin, gabapentin, amitriptyline. This is a drug addict, by the way. You know, I'm down as being a drug addict. Anyway, do you know that the doctor once, I'd said to the doctor, obviously I'm a crack addict, and he went, what is that, something you eat? This is what I'm saying. Still, this is not that long ago. Anyway, so I've had the back operation. I used to wake up thinking that, and I'd be checking my dressing gown pockets for crack pipes because I was in the crack house.
In your mind?
In my mind. But thinking I had the pipe. And the same, I had coronavirus. And obviously not that I was on medication. I haven't taken medication for years for that simple reason that I can't have medication. I think for years, crack replaced all of the dopamine and serotonin, or the levels. I don't understand it all, but I just know that. So for someone like me, like I have headaches, so they'd given me antidepressants for the headaches, and it actually made me want to commit suicide. I don't think I'm quite right, which drug use will do that to somebody. Heavy drug use for 13 years. So my levels aren't right, as I say. So as I say, I can't take antidepressants or anything. The coronavirus, obviously, I was in this otherworldly, because coronavirus, I don't quite know what it is, and that
triggered you.
Triggered me where I thought I was back in and again with the pipes. And that, not so much last time, but this time, because I wanted people to know when they pick up a drug, when I did my first pipe or whatever, I don't know. I never realised that, and I'm not saying it's everybody's outcomes and everybody's consequences, but what I'm saying is actions have consequences. The consequences of those things is where I did end up, and the things that did happen to me. And again, we haven't got time for it all, but you know, that was just the tip of the iceberg of all the things that did happen to me.
Yeah, I just think that it's important for you to acknowledge as well that, you know, the actions that people inflicted on you also had a consequence.
Yeah.
And I hope that you really do understand that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, part of it is for you to take responsibility for, to learn from, but it's not to like blame yourself and take full responsibility, you know?
I think that's why I have got such a thing about giving back. I think that sometimes I think, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to just stay in bed forever now, where I'm safe, in bed, preferably where I can't eat, because I think food is a factor for me as well. I think codependency is a big issue for me, but that's a whole nother thing. And the guilt thing of wanting to make it up. Again, as I said, with the mush clothes and that, you know, how can you make up not having a mum?
Yeah.
And this whole other thing, men can take drugs and drink, but when it's a mother, the shame of it all, because you're supposed to be looking after, and I know it's the gender thing, whatever, but men go to work. This was years ago, remember? Women look after the kids. I'm not saying I didn't go to work either, because I did, but what I'm saying is, from when you take that mother out of the picture that cares and nurtures and supports those kids, where do the kids end up? That's why I was so proud that my kids were straight goers and that didn't go the wrong way. I mean, I don't know how, but, you know, as I say, you know, but it's actually a miracle, I would say, you know.
Well, I think that's the perfect way to round it up. We've run out of time now.
It goes so quickly, doesn't it?
I know. But I really appreciate you, man. And I know this is a continued conversation that we're going to constantly be having. But I just respect you for your bravery and for coming back and allowing us to dig a bit deeper.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you.